Have you wondered what are some of the essential skills for success in audit? Stay tuned, we're going to give you some great answers. Welcome everyone, and to help us better understand what are some of the essential skills for success in audit, we have with us two Chief Audit Executives. We have Rob Clark and Phil Hurd. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Hernan.
So how about we begin with technical skills? Phil, can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the hot topics and the kinds of skills that auditors need to have? Just baseline. Again, there's a very long list, I'm sure, but just some of the key things to help our viewers get started.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I think is most prevalent in terms of need is what would have probably about 20 years ago been considered in-depth IT skills, but are now considered almost necessary to know. And those are things like understanding the World Wide Web, how it works, where you can get information, how to get information off the internet. Those technical skills of understanding how a network, a local area network, a wide area network, a metropolitan area network, a campus network, communicates at a base level is almost necessary to be able to look at internal controls.
A lot of systems are now dependent on computer systems, right? A lot of the controls that we are dependent on are going to flow through, be executed by, or configured within systems. So to your point then, having that understanding of how systems work, how computers are programmed, designed, configured, and perhaps maybe having some understanding of where some of the common failure points are. Would you say that's also an important expansion of what you just shared?
Oh, absolutely. Whenever you're looking at a system, now most of our accounting systems are electronic. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen a non-electronic accounting system in 10 years or so. And so understanding how you get information from one point of the organization, one functional area to another, what that information is going to look like, what its vulnerability is, these are all things that were expected of a normal audit. So yes, in short order, the answer is certainly yes to that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Rob, as we take a look at this topic and as we go beyond just the technical skill, I don't want to say just the technical skills because they're so central to everything, but as we expand this list, what are some of the other skills that you believe are essential for success in this profession?
Well, I'm glad we start with the technical skills and the accounting skills and the business acumen that you need to have in order to be an effective auditor. Because there is, as Phil said, there's not a single system or process at our organizations that does not impact or rely upon information technology. But when we take that part of it aside and have that as a given that we have to have some skills and competencies in that area, we also need to look at what is going to help us to be effective agents of change. We have the unique opportunity within our organizations to have the visibility, the reporting capability to elevate and escalate issues that perhaps have been kind of bumping up against the ceiling by people within the organization that have not had an opportunity to get funding, for example, for additional resources that are necessary in order to shore up the infrastructure. We have an opportunity to independently, objectively be able to perform those analyses. The best way that I believe that we need to do that is in a spirit of partnership and collaboration and teamwork. After all, if we as internal auditors, we have the same person signing our checks at the bottom as the technology partner, as the people within accounting, within the procurement function, et cetera. So we want to look at it in partnership. We want to look at it as how we can partner with them to examine the areas of risk and then figure out what the most feasible solutions are in order to try to address that. So those communication skills cannot be overemphasized.
So I'm hearing you talk about the interaction with others, the ability to discuss dynamics within the organization in a constructive way and be able to find common ground and solutions that are going to be pragmatic, effective, and appropriate to keep the organization on track and achieving its objectives. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think we need to look at having a skill set that is going to allow us to feel comfortable for everyone within the auditing organization to feel comfortable should they be asked to present information on our observations and recommendations to any level of the organization, including the board. So I have made it a requirement for people within my teams to actually work on and hone those skills of presentation. Being involved in Toastmasters, getting involved in expanding your skill sets in organizational structure and presentation. I think that is absolutely critical so that we can take the technical stuff that we're reviewing and then synthesize that into layman's terms to make sure that our audiences in the decision-making capacity understand exactly what our message is and not be intimidated by a bunch of acronyms.
Very good, very helpful there. Phil, as we're thinking about helping the organization move forward and as auditors develop this broad spectrum of skill sets, they need to rely a lot of information coming out of computer systems. And in my experience, there's sometimes a little bit of friction, if not challenges and difficulties, obtaining information. By and large, auditors, we encourage them to learn how to do their own mining, extraction and mining of data. But when they need to work with their IT counterparts, what suggestions do you have to help make that collaboration more productive? How can they get the data that they need to do some of the things that Rob was just describing for us?
The old adage that comes to mind is, if I ask you for the time, don't explain to me how to build a clock. And, you know, when you're dealing with IT people, to be in the kind of the IT realm nowadays, you have to have an in-depth skill set. And so one of the things that auditors can do and should do is identify the result that they want from the data extraction, these type of files, but put that out there without explaining to the IT people in as best they can, not how to do it, but what they need. And a lot of times, one of the things that I find is particularly younger auditors will come in and they'll want to tell their IT folks as they're getting a data extraction, well, I need you to do this, and I want you to make sure that you put this function on this table and this, and on and on and on, to the point that the other person feels a little bit like, hey, I know my job, just leave me alone. And what that does is if you use that mindset, it begins to create a kind of adversarial perspective. One of the things that I encourage my auditors is to give that base information of what you need, what that extraction should look like. Let them do their job. And if you don't get exactly what you want, ask them for some specific details, but let them tell you versus you telling them. And there are ways to do that, and there are ways to get your message across. But I cannot emphasize enough, you know, I spent probably the better part of a decade in Toastmasters honing my skills to be able to communicate so that I could, in fact, do those things.
And on that note, I will imagine also that the way or the media that we use to communicate these things is very important. In general, a lot of people tend to automatically default to email. And it's a very versatile, very powerful, very useful, if not almost universally used tool. But we have to be careful how we communicate using that. And in many cases, we're probably better served by either making a phone call, having a video chat with the person so we can do some of the things that you're describing. Is that so?
Absolutely. And I will say, you know, email doesn't give you the ability to read body language. It lacks context. If you don't describe how you're feeling or your perspective in there, then what you may get is a very harsh message. And sometimes, I'll tell you, one of the best things that I do is when I see trails of emails like that between my auditors, I will have them sit down with me at a conference table, and I'll say, I want you to play the role of this IT person or this recipient, and I want you to read this aloud. And it's like a magic comes across them. You know who I learned that from? This guy right here by my side.
All right, so let me ask him another question, because one of the things that you mentioned previously, Rob, was the importance of communicating and collaborating with our various stakeholders. And we can probably dissect that group of individuals and groups of organizations different ways. One of them is just horizontally people within our department and colleagues within the organization. You mentioned like corporate compliance, maybe the controller's office and so on. But we also need to be able to communicate up and down the chain of command. So as we're trying to take this message and be more supportive and helpful to the organization, what suggestions do you have? What kind of skills are necessary to be able to communicate effectively up to the board and to the C-suite?
Well, I think when you talk about expanding your skill set of communications, it's really looking at what are all the different tools that you want to have in your toolbox, and being able to put yourself in the position of being the recipient. Sitting in as many board meetings as I have, I look at the ways that people communicate, and those who do it most effectively are those who personalize it and not try to come up with a really impressive display or presentation, but those who are able to take the concepts and speak to the person as if they were just sitting across the table over a cup of coffee. How can you make it such that you're not trying to impress people with your knowledge, you're trying to demonstrate that you are trying to get the message to your recipient in a way that he or she is going to understand. And one of the things that I have always looked at is how can you make sure that people are listening? And one of the things that I've seen is that when people are laughing, they're listening. And so if you can actually incorporate some comedic skills, some timing, some phrases and some things that actually make people see that you are human and that you're not just a walking textbook of auditing standards, then people are likely to perk their ears up. And that's one of the things that I did, Phil did. We got ourselves involved in a stand-up comedy class. Why? Because we want to go on the stand-up comedy circuit? No, it's because we wanted to have additional skill sets that we could incorporate into our communication toolbox so that we could have the ability to communicate with every level within the organization.
That is a great technique and a great skill set to develop. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your willingness to share some of your techniques and what you see as essential skill sets that internal auditors should acquire now and continue to strengthen in the future as we continue to evolve as a profession. And to our viewers, we have a lot more content to share with you, so please subscribe to our channel. There's a lot there for you.